I'm glad Paul has passed away. Wow, there is a lot to unpack in Muso Tensei Jobless Reincarnation, Season 2, Episode 22. I am literally in shock right now, but at the same time, spoiler alert, it was already in the title. If you saw the title of the video, you knew what was going to happen. Paul Greyrat has passed away in his mission to recover Zenith. And I've got to say, this guy was a piece of work from beginning to end. So take this as somewhat of a rant. We're going to go over the episode, break down what happened, and I'm going to just continue to go into why I really think this guy is a total piece of crap. And I mean, it's pretty startling, but I feel like it just ended the way it was probably supposed to, the way the world really works. And by the way, happy Father's Day for those of you that are currently watching on Father's Day, because somehow, the creators of the series, the directors, and they did this deliberately. They released this episode on Father's Day, and it's not just Father's Day in the United States at the time of making this video, and when the video came out, it came out on June 16th, 2024, Father's Day in the United States and also in Japan. I checked, I did the research. It is Father's Day in Japan today, the time of recording this video. Oh my gosh. So we already know what happened with Paul after Rudy came back from that continent. The circles went off, and basically Rudy and everyone else was transported years earlier. Him with him him and everyone else was transported all around the world, and he basically, him and Eris, and they all had to fight to get back. And when Paul finally sees Rudy after many years, what does he do? He basically says that he could have done better. He could have went and found his mother, despite the fact that Rudy was only a little kid, despite the fact when he left home, he was like 7 years old. Despite everything that happened to Rudy, Paul always basically treated him kind of like a grown man. And then this just was a perfect example of him expecting so much from a little kid. Yes, Rudy is reincarnated in a new world, but he's still a child. He's in the body of a child. He is still treated like a child. That is how others perceive him. He still psychologically is like a child. He has memories of an adult, but he is not an adult. So he is growing up all over again in another world, and this is the reality. And and that's what happened to him. It's the saddest thing in the world. And of course, he forgave Paul for what happened. They basically they basically patched things up thanks to Rudy and the bartender that was there at the time, you know, and who coaxed Rudy into basically being the bigger man. So Rudy leaves, goes to the university after seeing his father, and keep in mind, in between then, he rescued his little sister and the maid, and goes to the university, forms a family, and then after makes some friends, meets the elf girl again, and they get married. He also takes in his little sisters during that period of time, and has to basically raise them as well, in the place of Paul, who's still out there looking for Xena. And I understand, not giving up on her. I would want someone who wouldn't give up on me, but he took it to the extremes. And, you know, he ended up almost costing people their lives because of his desperation to find Zenith, and his and his lack of planning. So then he calls for help. Rudy goes, who he has a child on the way. He has a pregnant wife, baby on the way. His two little girls, his two sisters are there by themselves. No one to protect them, right? I mean, his friends are there, but they're not his family. And he basically takes off, goes there, and what ends up happening? They go through the labyrinth. He brings a book that ultimately helps them to locate Zenith. And so yeah, they locate Zenith in this episode. And what does Paul do? Paul basically tells Rudy that, listen, I want you This is something that a parent should never say to a child, but I want you to save your mother even if you lose your life doing it. And Rudy responds, well, hey, that's definitely a father is never supposed to something a father is never supposed to say to a child, but it is what it's this is Paul we're talking about. Can't really expect too much from him, right? And we get to see some scenes from the video. They're at the labyrinth, and they basically at the circle. They find a circle, they go to the circle, and they're gonna step on the circle that they discovered in the other video was hiding under the first circle. Rudy found it, and now they go there and they discover that there's actually a Hydra. So they decide to face off against the Hydra, and there's you can see the Hydra right there. And Paul basically gets pretty darn wild. He starts, he charges in foolishly without really thinking it true, and it even they try to like even drag him back, like, Paul, you're going to get everyone murked. So they exit not the Lambert, but they exit the room where the Hydra is, and also Zenith. They discover that Zenith's also in there. So basically, she's stuck in the crystal. So that's Zenith right there. Zenith is stuck in the crystal. They find Zenith. They're like, oh, Zenith's there. Paul goes crazy. They almost end up getting murked. They get out and they regroup. They basically say, hey, we can go back and just try again. Like, so let's go back to the town, regroup. Paul's like, no, we need to do this right now. Rudy, he gets into an argument. Rudy keeps a level head. Then Paul admits that, you know what, he's glad Rudy's his son. He's a failure as a father because even at a moment like this, he cannot keep a level head. I mean, it's just a load of crap. And it was something he wanted to tell Rudy earlier in the episode. Rudy stopped him because he basically was like, nah, we're all going to go home together. Yeah, that didn't happen. There's Paul sitting there. He says, right, sorry, I'm calm. And he basically, runs into this. Rudy was not prepared. He's like, no, we're going to go back. We're going to do it right now instead of going back to town. If they had gone back to town, they could have, figured out a better plan because they fought it once, didn't, and there was almost some serious losses. They didn't get hurt, but they were able to make it out unscathed the first time. But instead of going back to town, regrouping, and even maybe getting some more party members to fight this thing, which would have been reasonable, or developing a strategy for taking it on with the limited information they had, they decided to go up against it again because of Paul, who essentially demanded it. What ends up happening is a series of total BS. Paul says, Rudy, this is not something a parent should ask of their child, but, save your mother, even if it means losing your own life. And Rudy says, that is something that a father should never ask of their child, but hey, whatever. So they return, they go to fight it, and the fight is really, really bad this time around. They figure out a strategy of like, okay, so we're gonna cut off heads off the Hydra because the heads were regenerating, but if we cut them off and we burn the head, burn the place where where it would regenerate, then it stops it from regenerating. It actually works. Rudy came up with that strategy, but it's not perfect. They get very close to defeating it, and then the last head basically almost takes Rudy out, but Paul saves him in the last moment. And because you can see there's Rudy being grabbed. It's got Rudy by the leg. Is that, well, I don't know if that's Rudy or the elf, but it ends up getting Rudy. And yeah, in the end, yeah, there's the scene. So basically, there's a scene right there. Rudy was almost about to get murked by the Hydra. Paul kicks him out of the way, saves him. However, it does not end well. Rudy ends up losing an arm, and not only does he lose the arm, but not only does he lose his arm, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy what happens. He puts his hand into the eye of the Hydra. Basically, you got to give Rudy credit, but it ends up costing him his arm in the end. And he's able to regenerate some of it, but of course he still loses his hand. It cannot regenerate the entire hand. We then discover that Paul has passed away, and his body has been split in two, and he kind of like passes away with a bit of a smile. The bastard. And the crystal, Zenith was basically in a crystal, and the crystal base is unlocked. They're carrying Zenith back. They burnt Paul's body. And what do we discover in the end? Zenith is basically recovering, but it turns out that It turns out that she cannot speak, so she can't speak. Something's wrong. Maybe mind is messed up, whatever. But this is just a recap of of what happened in the episode. And Paul is a total piece of garbage. He was ready to risk the life of Rudy multiple times to get what he wanted. He showed very little regard for his son's life. I'm not saying he doesn't care about Rudy, but there was always a huge disconnect. And in the end, he was willing to sacrifice his son's life to save Zenith, even though he was also doing it with the maid. And he could care less about his two little girls. And he could feel it. He could basically feel it that he was on he was gonna pass, like the way he was behaving. It was like there were warnings all over the place, but he knew what he was doing. He knew he was a total mess. Oh my god, he felt it. And the thing is, like, that Hydra that they were fighting, from what I understand, Paul is extremely experienced fighting in these places. So when he ran into that monster, he damn well knew at that moment they should not have gone up against it. The smartest thing to do would have been to turn back. He could care less. He was so impulsive that he went out and did this, messed around, and then found out, and it cost him his life, cost Rudy his hand, and Zenith her husband, and then on top of it, those little girls, their father. They are going to have to grow up without a father now. Zenith is only the mother of one of those little girls. It's great that both of their mothers are alive, but Rudy is going to have to basically completely step up and take care of them going forward because dad is dead. Dad's gone. That punk is out of the picture. And I mean, this was a long time coming anyway. But it's like, holy cow. And it's Happy Father's Day. Like, this is like fathers, bro. Fathers. And not to say that mothers are all that much better, but it's just like unbelievable. Like total, total BS. Total BS. I don't know. That's my rant. Overall, if I had to rate this episode on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give this. Wow. I wouldn't. The animations were not bad. The animations were good in the episode. It wasn't the greatest animations I've ever seen in my entire life, but they also were not low visually. So I would say that in terms of overall, I would give it a 9. I'd give it a 9. All right. Visually, I'd say maybe around a good 7 or 8, but overall, I'd give it a 9. I think it was a great episode. There are some people who may not like the episode just because someone passed away, but I thought it was a great episode in the sense that it really captured the kind of piece of crap that Paul Greyrat was. And it's not that I hated Paul. I did not hate Paul. I think that his character was well written and he served his purpose, and his passing, and it just kind of makes sense. You know, I did not see Rudy losing his hand, but I kind of understand. It makes sense as well, considering the fact like they all knew that this thing was dangerous. This was an S rank dungeon if you think about it though. This was an S rank dungeon, and this is Rudy's first dungeon. Like, bro, even 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 Rudy's teacher, she says to Rudy, she's like, Rudy, don't worry, I'm here. I'll keep you moving forward, because she knew like that Rudy was not. This is not his natural thing. Like, he'll literally tense up, but it's like she was there. Because she knew he was completely brand new to dungeons, like these Lambrets, and his first Lambret is an S rank Lambret, S rank. Like, bro, how do you get tossed into something like that? I understand that, like, he's like really powerful. He's a very, very powerful mage, but bro, an S rank, like, this is at the very top. This is like basically to go in this type of Lambret. That's the type. These are the type of people that would basically have to fight like god tier opponents, which is interesting because Rudy has literally fought a god. But I mean, it's like this guy just does not get a break. Does not get a break whatsoever. And of course, there's also more misfortune to come in his future. I won't give any spoilers, but unfortunately, I did find out something that evidently will happen. I don't know how far into the future. This is some depressing stuff, but it's still a great story. I love the series. I really, really enjoy the series. This was the end of Paul Greyrat, and I'm not grieving him. It's like, I guess it's kind of like many of us who have, similar issues with our fathers. I guess we can very much relate to Rudy. Like a lot of people who have complicated relationships with their parents, especially complicated relationships with their fathers, and putting out this episode on Father's Day, I realized it probably just opened up a ton of feels for a lot of different people. And for me, I mean, like I don't have a relationship with my father. It's not that he was not in my life. He's just a piece of crap, which just kind of makes me feel like Rudy. Like, yeah, I mean, like honestly, Paul was a much better father to Rudy than my father was to me, to say the least. Like he showed more care and concern for Rudy than my father showed for me, to be very honest with you. So it's like I kind of like, yeah, I mean, yeah, from one brother to another, I feel you, little bro. I feel you. But what did you think? Did you watch the episode? How do you feel about the episode? Do you relate to the things that I'm saying regarding Paul Greyrat? And the end of Paul Greyrat, and that it made sense. And I'm not grieving for Paul. Are you grieving for Paul? I want to know what you guys think. So let's talk about it in the comments. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to good times and cheers.